About 5 years ago, I was on a road trip down the California coast with my friend Mike. It was late April, and we wanted to avoid the summer tourist rush, so we set out early, planning to reach Big Sur before sunset. We'd been driving for hours, mostly on winding two-lane highways, surrounded by endless stretches of forest and cliffs. Around mid-afternoon, we passed through a small town whose name I can't remember now. It was just a place to grab gas and a snack. The town had this quiet, slightly off feeling, the kind you only notice when you're not from around there. The gas station was nearly empty, except for one old truck parked by the entrance. It looked like it hadn't moved in a long time. A single guy sat behind the counter, barely looking up as we paid. By the time we got back on the road, the sun was starting to set. We figured we'd hit Big Sur by nightfall if we kept a steady pace. But about 10 minutes after we left the town, I noticed something strange. A black car had pulled onto the highway right behind us. It looked like an older sedan, nothing fancy, but it was following a little too close for comfort. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe the driver was just in a hurry, but when I sped up, they did too. I pointed it out to Mike, who glanced in the rearview mirror, his face tense. "It's probably nothing," he said, but he didn't look convinced. We kept driving, hoping they'd pass us eventually, but they stayed right on our tail, never more than a car length away. Whenever we slowed down for a curve, they slowed down too. And when we sped up, they matched our pace exactly. Mike and I exchanged nervous looks. We tried to think of reasons why someone would be following us, but nothing added up. The highway was empty. No other cars, no exits, just miles of forest on either side. After another 20 minutes of this, I decided to test the theory that they were actually following us. There was a turnout coming up, a spot where drivers could pull over to take in the view. I told Mike my plan, and he nodded, clearly as uneasy as I was. As we approached the turnout, I signaled and started to pull over, keeping an eye on the car behind us. To my surprise, they slowed down too and parked a few hundred feet behind us, keeping their headlights on. We sat in silence, watching them from the rearview mirror. The car just sat there, the driver hidden by the glare of the headlights. I thought about getting out, but something told me it was a bad idea. Mike must have felt it too because he whispered, "Don't, let's just go." As I started the car back up and pulled out onto the highway, I hoped they'd just let us go. But the moment we hit the road, the car pulled out after us. My heart was pounding as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to keep calm. We were a good hour from the next town, and it was getting dark fast. Mike suggested we pull another trick. Take the next exit we found, which would lead us onto an older, less traveled road. Maybe we could lose them there or at least figure out what they wanted. The next exit came up, a narrow gravel road leading off into the trees, so I swerved onto it, and we bounced along the rough path, hoping they'd give up. But the headlights followed. The trees on either side were dense, creating this eerie tunnel effect. I could barely see more than a few feet ahead, but I kept driving, my hands shaking as I tried to keep control on the uneven road. The car stayed behind us, close enough that I could almost feel their lights burning into the back of my head. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we spotted an old, abandoned diner by the side of the road. The windows were boarded up, the sign barely hanging by a single rusted chain. I pulled into the empty lot, hoping the car would pass us this time. But instead, they pulled in too, parking just a few spaces away. This time, I saw movement. Someone got out, just a dark figure against the dim light. They stood by their car, looking at us but not moving closer. I could feel Mike tense up beside me, and for a second I considered driving away, but something told me not to. It was like a standoff, each of us waiting for the other to make the first move. Then, without warning, the figure raised an arm and pointed directly at us. I don't know why, but a chill ran down my spine. We sat there, frozen, until the figure suddenly turned, got back into the car, and drove off into the night. We waited for a while, making sure they were really gone, before finally starting the car again. The rest of the trip was quiet. We barely spoke, and neither of us looked in the rearview mirror. We just wanted to get out of there as fast as we could. To this day, I still don't know what they wanted or why they followed us. But every time I think about it, I get that same uneasy feeling, like we narrowly escaped something we weren't supposed to understand. It happened about 4 years ago, one of those October nights when it gets dark way too early. I was driving from a work conference in Santa Fe, heading back to Phoenix. It was just past 9 p.m., and I'd already been on the road for hours. At that hour, there's hardly any traffic on those stretches of highway. Just miles of empty road, desert, and mountains in the distance. About halfway through, somewhere along Highway 60, I noticed a figure standing just off the shoulder on the side of the road. He was waving his arms, like he was trying to flag someone down. I slowed down a little, squinting to get a better look. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, and he was just standing there in jeans and a jacket, looking almost desperate. I figured his car must have broken down, and he needed help. But something in me hesitated, like a voice at the back of my head telling me to just keep driving. As I got closer, I could see he wasn't near any car. There was nothing around him, just this guy standing out there on an empty stretch of desert road in the middle of the night. That little voice in my head kept saying, "Don't stop." But then again, I felt guilty. What if he was really stranded? So, against my better judgment, I slowed down and rolled down my window just a crack as I pulled up beside him. "You okay, man?" I asked, leaning a bit toward the open window. He stepped closer, just enough for me to see his face in the dim glow of my headlights. He looked tired, maybe even a bit anxious. "Yeah, I just need a ride to the next gas station," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something off about it, like he was too calm for the situation. I looked down the empty road. "Where's your car?" He shrugged, not really answering, and just said again, "Can you give me a ride?" His eyes didn't quite meet mine, just sort of darted around, glancing down the road. And that's when I noticed it. His clothes were clean, almost too clean for someone who'd been stranded on the side of the highway. That little voice in my head was getting louder, but I didn't want to just leave him out there. So I tried to play it off like I was in a rush. Yeah, I'm actually pretty low on gas myself," I lied. "But I can call someone for you if you want." I could see his jaw clench a bit, like he didn't like that answer. "No, I just need a ride," he said, almost pleading. I shook my head, apologizing, and rolled up the window a bit more. "Sorry, man. Wish I could help." Then, before he could argue, I slowly pulled away. As I looked in my rearview mirror, he just stood there, watching my car get smaller and smaller. After a while, he disappeared from sight, and I was back to just the empty road. I kept driving, feeling a little uneasy about the whole thing. Something about that encounter didn't sit right, but I tried to shake it off, figuring I'd done the right thing. About 20 minutes later, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. They were pretty far back, just a faint glow, but they were definitely there. I couldn't remember any other cars passing by, so I thought maybe it was someone coming up from behind. But as the minutes ticked by, the headlights got closer, and my nerves started to creep back up. The car kept gaining on me until it was just a few feet behind. Whoever was driving didn't try to pass, just stayed glued to my bumper. I could feel my heart rate pick up, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter. I slowed down slightly, hoping they'd pass, but they didn't. They just stayed right there, following me. After about 5 minutes of this, I decided to test something. I tapped the brakes lightly, not enough to stop, but just to signal that I was slowing down. But instead of passing, they stayed right on my tail, perfectly matching my speed. At that point, I was more than creeped out. I pushed the gas pedal, trying to put some distance between us. My car wasn't exactly fast, but I figured if I could get to the next town, I'd be fine. The problem was that town was still miles away, and this car didn't seem like it was in any rush to back off. Then, just as I was about to lose my nerve, I saw a small rest stop up ahead. It was one of those tiny pull-offs with a single gas pump and a convenience store, the kind that's closed at night but still lit up. Without thinking twice, I pulled in and parked near the pump, hoping the driver would keep going. But to my horror, they pulled in too, parking just a few spaces away. I didn't get out, just sat there watching them through the rearview mirror. I couldn't see their face. The headlights from my car were casting strange shadows across their windshield. We just sat there in a weird standoff, neither of us moving. I could feel my heart pounding, my palms getting sweaty on the steering wheel. After what felt like forever, I saw the figure inside the other car shift, like they were reaching for something. My gut told me to leave, whatever this was. I didn't want to find out. I turned the key in the ignition, ready to peel out of there. But as I looked up, I saw the car door open, and someone stepped out, their silhouette just barely visible in the dim light. It was the guy from the side of the road. My heart skipped a beat, and I didn't waste another second. I threw the car in reverse, backed up so fast my tires squealed, and then hit the gas, tearing out of that rest stop and back onto the highway. I didn't look back. I didn't even breathe until I saw the faint lights of the next town on the horizon. By the time I finally pulled into a proper gas station, my hands were shaking. I sat there for a while, trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But nothing about it made any sense. The guy, the car, the way he seemed to know where I'd be. Even now, years later, I still wonder what he wanted. A couple of years ago, my friend Joe and I were driving back from a concert in Nevada. We'd left the venue pretty late, just after midnight, and were heading back to LA on those endless desert roads. Normally, we'd have planned better and gotten a hotel, but Joe had to be back early the next day, so we figured we'd tough it out with some energy drinks and music. Somewhere around 2 a.m., we realized we'd missed an exit. I think it was my fault, honestly. I was too busy fiddling with the radio to notice the sign. We ended up on this narrow 2-lane road, barely paved and lined with endless stretches of desert on either side. We were both tired and figured we'd just keep going until we hit a familiar highway. About 30 minutes in, we noticed a dim light up ahead, almost like someone's high beams were shining just over a hill. It was strange because we hadn't seen another car for miles. The light was faint but unmistakable, like it was waiting for us to get closer. Joe joked that it was probably some random town, but we both knew that was unlikely out there. I slowed down a bit as we got closer, and that's when I realized the light wasn't on the road but on the side of it. And as we rolled past, we saw an old car parked on the dirt shoulder, a single, dim headlight beaming into the darkness. There was a guy standing by the driver's side door, facing us. He had one hand in his pocket and was just staring. He didn't wave, didn't flag us down, just kept looking as we passed. It sent this weird chill down my spine, like something was wrong with him. Joe said it was just some guy whose car probably broke down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. We kept driving, talking about how weird it was, but mostly trying to laugh it off. About 10 minutes later, we saw another light up ahead. Same deal, just a faint glow on the side of the road. But as we got closer, we realized it was the same car. Same dim headlight, same guy standing beside it, his face still in shadow, staring as we passed. This time, I could feel Joe tense up next to me. I sped up, trying to put some distance between us and that car, whatever it was. We didn't say anything for a few minutes, but then Joe broke the silence. "Dude, that was the same car, right?" He sounded just as freaked out as I felt. I nodded, trying to keep my focus on the road. It couldn't have been. There's no way he could have gotten ahead of us. There weren't any turnoffs. But we both knew what we'd seen. I kept driving faster, thinking maybe if we got to a main road, we'd be fine. But a few minutes later, we saw it again. Ahead of us, that single headlight shining in the darkness. Same car, same guy. This time, I didn't slow down. I floored it, heart racing, as we blew past him. He didn't move, didn't call out for help, just stood there, watching us with that same blank expression. Joe was gripping the seat, looking back as we flew down the road. He kept muttering, "This isn't real, man. This can't be happening." But it was real, too real. After another 10 minutes, I saw headlights coming up behind us. My stomach twisted as I realized it was him. Same old car, and he was gaining on us, fast. I could barely think, my mind racing as I watched his headlights get closer in the rearview mirror. There was no way this guy should have been able to catch up with us. I tried to push my little sedan as fast as it would go, praying we'd hit a major highway soon. But that car just kept coming. Those headlights locked onto us like they were glued. Joe started panicking, saying we should just pull over, let him pass. But I didn't trust that idea. Something in me told me that if we stopped, it would be worse. Finally, after what felt like hours, we saw an intersection up ahead with a faint glow from a gas station sign. I hit the brakes and made the sharpest right turn of my life, skidding a bit as we pulled into the station. We sat there, breathless, watching the road, but no one passed us. The old car was gone. I don't think we moved for a good 5 minutes, just sat there, catching our breath. Eventually, Joe got out and went inside to ask the clerk if he'd seen anyone else pass through. The clerk gave him a weird look and said we were the first car he'd seen all night. We didn't see the car again for the rest of the drive home. But even now, every time I'm on a dark, empty road, I feel a knot of anxiety in my chest. I half expect to see that single headlight up ahead, waiting, and that figure standing on the side of the road, watching.